The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, warned that the country is at the brink of its capacities facing the COVID-19 health crisis. Niger reports 12 fatalities due to a cholera outbreak. People in Afghanistan called for peace and demanded that the government and the Taliban to solve their confrontations through negotiation. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, warns that the country is at the brink of its capacities, facing the COVID-19 health crisis. The chief of state assured that had the government not done all it could to contain and to minimize the effects of the respiratory illness, affairs will be much more dire as of now. Díaz-Canel warned that the country is at the brink of its capacities in infrastructure, resources, medicine, and oxygen. The president indicated that even with the current problems, the most urgent sanitary conditions in the country can be warranted. He confided in the population and asked everyone to grasp on the difficulty of the matter and call upon the authorities for a more efficient and effective management to reduce the chain of infections. The mandatory of the Caribbean nation ordered to keep up the pace in the vaccination process and to increase production speed of Abdala and Soberana, bearing in mind the limited span of supplies. The Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil asked on Monday the International Criminal Court, the ICC, to investigate the far-right President Jair Bolsonaro for his anti-indigenous policy, which they call genocide and ecocide. Brazilian indigenous peoples have already filed other complaints against Bolsonaro at the ICC, but this is the first time they do it with indigenous lawyers, explains in a statement the OPIB, which brings together several organizations that defend the rights of indigenous peoples. Brazilian indigenous people denounce that the presence of illegal miners and loggers in the reserves are one of the main factors for the spread of the coronavirus in the communities. The coronavirus has left 1,166 fatalities and over 57,000 confirmed cases among the almost 900,000 indigenous people living in Brazil. Since coming to power, Bolsonaro has defended the opening of indigenous lands and protected areas in the Amazon for exploitation of resources, which has earned him criticism inside and outside Brazil. Also in Brazil, the Superior Electoral Court on Monday accused President Jair Bolsonaro of disclosing secret police documents and requested that he be investigated for it before the Supreme Court. The Electoral Court, which has already initiated other proceedings against Bolsonaro for delegitimizing the electronic voting system, has now asked the country's highest judicial instance to investigate the head of state to clarify whether he committed a crime for disclosing secrets. The magistrates consider that the president's behavior could constitute a criminal offense for divulging without justified cause secret or reserved information. The action of the president is part of this aggressive campaign to sow doubts about the reliability of the electronic voting system that has been operating in Brazil since 1996 and has been praised for its transparency by several international observers. And men claiming to speak for Mexico's most powerful drug cartel have released a video threatening to murder a prominent female news anchor over what they deem to be unfair coverage. The warning was made by a man who said it was on behalf of the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel. He accused Milenio Television Network of being biased in the coverage of the battle between the cartel and the vigilante groups. In the video, journalist Azucena Urresti is threatened directly. Groups representing journalists have come out in her support and demanded that the government offer her protection. A spokesperson from President López Obrador administration said that the government will take the necessary measures to protect threatened journalists and news outlets. China recalled its ambassador to Lithuania and demanded the European country's government to reciprocate the act to uphold the One China principle, as informed by a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson declaration. The statement, published on the Foreign Ministry's website, said that the Lithuanian government had recently announced its decision to allow the Taiwan authorities to open a diplomatic affairs office under the separatist principle of sole Taiwanese representation, move taken by the Lithuanian part despite China's warnings of consequences. The spokesperson explained that the acts taken by Lithuania's officials violate the established points of a communique between Beijing and Vilnius, an attempt against Chinese sovereignty and the territorial integrity. The spokesperson concluded that any action to undermine China's unity and seek separatist results will meet a dead end, and that the sole legal government that represents the whole of China is called People's Republic of China. Democratic People's Republic of Korea rejects South Korea-United States joint military exercises. On Tuesday, Kim Jong-un, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, said the drills are an unwanted, self-destructive action that threats the North Korean people and raises tensions in the Korean peninsula. She also noted that Washington and Seoul could face greater security threats if they go ahead with the military drills planned for this month. The senior official accused South Korea of treacherous treatment for continuing the drills shortly after the two countries agreed to restore direct cross-border communications, cut off more than a year ago in an attempt to ease the tensions. As part of the North Korean response to the military actions, Pyongyang did not answer calls from the South Korean military and liaison offices, although communications usually takes place twice a day. And a new day of protests in Thailand came with protesters' violence as they attacked a police station and set it on fire. The police station near Victory Monument in Bangkok was set on fire by the civilian mob, and although the protest was called off, police and manifestors remained clashing in the streets. The authorities trying to disperse the crowd with rubber bullets and tear gas. This cycle of protests, which has not stopped since early 2020, seeks to make constitutional changes and to limit the power of the monarchy, as well as to depose Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, ex-defense minister who came to power after a coup in 2014. The protests also seek labor rights, to legalize abortion practices, gender equality, and to reduce the influence of the military and the royal family in the nation's politics and the monopolies of key economic sectors. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. In Niger, 12 deaths due to a cholera outbreak, as reported by Ministry of Health, occurred. A cholera outbreak in southern Niger killed 12 people and infected 201 others in 3 regions, while heavy rains helped spread the disease further, the country's health minister said on Monday. Niger's southern neighbor, Nigeria, is also grappling with a cholera outbreak, which has killed at least 653 people in 22 of its 36 states since March. Niger's health authorities believe the outbreaks are connected with an epidemic that has been ravaging cross-border regions for several months. United Nations condemned the massacre of 240 civilians, among them 107 children, in the Ethiopian region of Afar. The United Nations Children's Fund said to be extremely alarmed by the reports of attacks against displaced families that sought refuge in a health center and a school in the region of Afar on Thursday, August the 5th. UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Ford stated that the escalation of conflicts in Afar and other areas neighboring Tigray is disastrous for children after months of crossfire that has left 400,000 people, among them 160 children, in famine conditions. The agency stressed that at least 4 million people in Tigray and the neighboring regions of Afar and Amhara are in an acute crisis situation. In the meantime, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees stated it has regained access to 2 Eritrean refugee camps in Ethiopia's war-torn Tigray region and warned that people living in there are facing dire conditions.
The UN Refugee Agency and its partners have regained access to the Mayaini and Adikharush camps for Eritrean refugees in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Violent clashes in the area had prevented UNHCR staff from reaching the camps since 13th of July. The delivery of urgently needed assistance restarted on the 5th of August for the 23,000 refugees in both camps. However, access is limited by a complex and fluid security situation, and refugees continue to face dire conditions. Basic services such as healthcare remain unavailable, and clean drinking water is running out.
In South Africa, an International Day of the World's Indigenous People, Khoekhoi descendants performed a cleaning ceremony on land recently reclaimed as part of a historic process of restoration and cultural revival. Johan Abrahams has more.
An ancient cultural cleansing ritual performed on land they were alienated from more than 3 centuries ago. When the Dutch colonized the tip of Africa, they also stripped the indigenous Khoekhoi from their land, culture and traditions. This area is known as Grabouw, about an hour's drive from Cape Town and known for its export fruit. During the 1600s, this was Hainokwa land under a Captain Klaus Dora. In 1693, Dora's kraal was attacked by the Dutch East India soldiers and thousands of livestock confiscated. Mark Matthews, a descendant of the Khoekhoi, who under colonial rule and apartheid was classified as colored, is part of this group, now reclaiming the land taken from them.
Our Khoi heritage gave us the right to take the land back, and also the United Nations Declaration allow us to be part of this and be here on that specific land.
The more than 1,000-hectare land will be governed as trust land by the people themselves. While the group might still face a legal battle, Mark is confident about overcoming that obstacle.
We are not afraid for a court case because we're ready for everything. We've got a lawyer team on our side. We know the history. We also know United Nations made provision for that. So we're ready for that.
A member of the South African Cabinet, Minister Patricia de Lille, has given her support for the project.
We need to continue to make sure that we fight for more and better houses for all our people.
Part of the plans for this cultural village is to have it declared a national heritage site to form part of the government-approved national Khoi and San heritage route. Johan Abrams for TeleSUR in Cape Town.
Bangladesh began vaccinating Rohingya refugees settled in camps located near the city of Cox's Bazar against the coronavirus following a sharp increase in cases. The authorities' initial plan is to vaccinate some 48,000 refugees over 55 years of age with the first dose. The camps are inhabited by more than 900,000 people, many of whom are constantly facing health problems, limited access to hygiene products and water. According to official data, more than 200,000 cases of coronavirus were detected and about 200 people died. In May, Bangladesh faced a resurgence of cases of COVID-19. A total of of 1.36 million infected people were identified in the country and more than 22,000 people died.
We need the vaccine to live through the current crisis. It will save us from the disease everyone is worried about. We are vaccinating people over 55 years old under this program. In this Camp 4, we are targeting to inoculate 1,000 people, and our daily achievement target is 112 people.
India recorded 28,000 new coronavirus cases, the lowest number in nearly 5 months, after it became the global epicenter of the disease. According to the Indian Health Ministry, the number of infections in the last 24 hours is the lowest in 147 days, leaving behind the record of more than 400,000 cases per day documented at the peak of the disease 3 months ago. The number of deaths confirmed by the Indian government also shows a significant decrease, with 373 new deaths, far from the nearly 4,000 deaths in a single day during the worst moment of the crisis in May. The total number of cases today reached 31.9 million and over 428,000 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. According to a study by the Center for Global Development published last month on excess mortality in India, the country recorded up to 5 million more deaths during the pandemic. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. People in Afghanistan called for peace and demanded that the government and the Taliban to solve the confrontations through negotiation. Residents in the capital, Kabul, expressed their concern over the recent situation, claiming that foreign intervention is the main cause of the chaos in the country. Since the United States and North Atlantic Treaty Organization troops began withdrawing in May, the Taliban have been launching attacks throughout the entire nation. In the meantime, the Afghan Ministry of Defense reported that in the last 24 hours, more than 300 insurgents were killed, leaving 445 wounded.
As the war in Afghanistan continues, there is insecurity everywhere. The war has an impact on the country's economy and its people. There are not jobs. The war has great impact on people's lives. The situation in Afghanistan is very terrible. Unfortunately, fighting is going on all over Afghanistan, in all the provinces and regions. Most families have lost their family members, their sons, daughters, wives, or children. This country yearns for peace. I hope the Taliban and the government will sit down together to establish a strong government. Only in this way can Afghanistan get out of the current situation.
The Taliban were in control of 6 Afghan provincial capitals on Tuesday after a blitz across the north forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes for the relative safety of Kabul and other cities. The insurgents now have their eyes on Mazar-e-Sharif, the north's biggest cities, whose fall will signal the total collapse of government control in a region that has traditionally been anti-Taliban. The International Committee of the Red Cross reported its health workers have treated more than 4,000 wounded in the past week, a situation that could worsen as fighting intensifies between the Taliban and the Afghan government. And Russia has reiterated that the United States military presence in Syria is illegal, adding that Washington's interpretation of Resolution number 2254 is ridiculous and ironic. A spokesperson for the illegitimate so-called international coalition, which is led by Washington under the pretext of fighting terrorism, claimed that the U.S. forces are deployed in Syria under the international law and the United Nations Security Council's resolution issued in November 2015. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova affirms the illegitimacy of the U.S. military presence in Syria, noting that they cling to unrealistic things and radically changed their approach after changing changing their administration. The Russian embassy in Washington stated that the U.S. interpretation of the resolution was ridiculous and a violation of Syria's sovereignty. Russia, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan have completed joint military drills on the Karmaidan range, located 20 kilometers from the border with Afghanistan. According to commander of Russia's Central Military District, Colonel General Alexander Lepin, for the first time, the joint force grouping used aircraft, reconnaissance and combat systems, and assault troops based on the experience gained in Syria. The exercise had taken place amid rising tensions in Afghanistan and the threat of terrorist groups entering Central Asian countries. More than 200 troops were involved in the drills, including 1,800 from Russia, as well as about 500 pieces of military hardware. Firefighters in Algeria battled over 31 blazes in high temperatures and extremely dry conditions, reported authorities of the country on Tuesday. The forests of the Kabylie region, east of the capital Algiers, burning walls of flames and drawing smoke to the skies, as water shortages in the country persist and the temperature rises to 46 degrees Celsius. There are at least fires in 14 districts and 5 people have lost their lives to them. Algeria is one of the Mediterranean countries to struggle with wildfires, along with Greece, Turkey and Cyprus. On Monday, a United Nations report showed how perilous climate change is and how much influence humanity's hand holds upon it. Furthermore, the report highlighted how societal activity can be the cause for abrupt weather scenarios, such as heat waves and wildfires. And tens of the wildfires remain active in the south of Italy, with an alarming situation mainly in the Calabria region, as general concern is taking over the heat wave that is expected to intensify with temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius. Italy is being affected by fires, much like its neighbor Greece and other Mediterranean countries, in a new cycle of heat wave and blazes. Officials explained that most of the 70 ongoing fires are condensed in the southern region, especially Sicily, Calabria and Apulia. On the other hand, in the Greek island of Evia, the fires still scorch the crops and forest areas as brigades and volunteers struggle to avoid disaster from striking the populated residential boroughs. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis pronounced himself regarding the wildfires that wipe out hundreds of homes and force thousands of inhabitants to leave their residences.
The previous days have been some of the most difficult for our country for decades. We gave and still give a battle with all our might, but we are facing a natural disaster of unprecedented proportions. In a few days, 586 fires broke out in all corners of Greece. Fires which, due to the unprecedented heat wave and the many months of drought, are now very difficult to extinguish.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.